Becca, would you like to? Got it. Okay, so welcome everybody to the Research Data Alliance plenary, the session presented by the National PID Strategies Interest Group. The theme of our session is Equity Challenges for National PID Strategies, and I will go through the agenda shortly. So this is the first session of the RDA plenary. So if you're new to RDA, welcome. And if you have been in many RDA plenaries and sessions, then welcome back. And it's good to have you here for this session. So my name is Natasha Simons, and I'm the Director of National Coordination at the Australian Research Data Commons, or ARDC, and I'm based in Brisbane, Australia. And I will hand to Hannah Herringova, who is my co-chair at this session. Hannah?
Hi, everyone. My name is Hannah Herringova. I'm the head of the National Center for Persistent Identifiers based in Prague, Czech Republic, at the National Library of Technology of the Czech Republic, and I will be your host of the session with Natasha.
Great, thank you. We also have Chris Brown on the call, who's also one of our co-chairs. Chris, I know it's a ridiculous hour there, but this is your moment if you'd like to say hello to everybody.
It's only 8 a.m. actually, so walk the dog at 6. So yes, it's afternoon almost. Yes, I'm another co-chair of the working group. I'm not co-hosting this session, but I'm co-hosting the repeat session. I work for JISC in the UK, worked for the National PID Strategies Working Group and now Interest Group. Welcome, everyone.
Thanks, Chris. So in the interests of time, we will just ask you if you would like to introduce yourself and where you're from, just please pop that into the chat. It'd be really nice to get an idea of where people are coming from and, perhaps any words of what you might like to get out of this session today. So I'll just move forward with the slides. Already done the welcome to the new RDA members. Here are the guiding principles. There are some newcomer sessions to welcome you. So if you're new to RDA, please attend one of those sessions that is listed in the agenda. So for today's session, so our National PID Strategies Interest Group is divided into 2 sessions. This is the first session. The second session is next week. So the agenda is Hannah and I will introduce the group and give you an update on our activities. We'll have some other PID session highlights from Josh Brown from More Brains Cooperative, who is the co-chair of the PID interest group. And I'm going to present a couple of slides on behalf of the Working with PIDs in Tools interest group, because we have done some collaborations with them and their co-chairs are unable to attend. Then we'll move on to the topic of the day, Equity Challenges for National PID Strategies. We have Helena Hussain from DataCite, Lombe Tembo from ORCID, and Melroy Almeida from the Australian Access Federation. And we'll follow that with open discussion before we close the meeting. And so anything that you'd like to raise during that open discussion. Here is the agenda in case you're interested to see it for the second session that we will be hosting at this RDA plenary. Again, a similar format, but the speakers are different. So it's worth noting if you wanted to go to both sessions. I think the only crossover there is Melroy, and everyone else is a different speaker. So we have speakers there from DataCite, the Central University of Chile, the Indian Statistical Institute at the Africa PID Alliance, and the Brazilian Institute of Information in Science and Technology. So all of those speakers will be at our second session, which I think is it's the 22nd in Australia, so probably the 21st for most people on this call. Okay, there are collaborative session notes. I put the link in the chat earlier. If someone could copy that again and paste it in, because if you come after the link's been pasted, you won't get it. So if you could repaste that, Hannah, that would be great. Right, so I've already gone through the agenda. Welcome to the National PID Strategies Interest Group. So what is that all about? So the main purpose of our group is to facilitate information exchange between people around the world who are developing national persistent identifier or PID strategies to improve coordination and alignment between those strategies so that we can streamline efforts, collaborate, share common challenges and overcome them, work on solutions together, etc. So we transitioned from a former working group called the National PID Strategies Working Group, and our working group there was, our group is currently endorsed by Council, and we are going to maintain and build on the outputs of the former working group, which that working group has now closed, and we're now the interest group. So here are your co-chairs, myself, Chris and Hannah, who have already introduced themselves, and also John Aspler from CRKN in Canada. John's not joining us today, just the time in Canada is dreadful, but John and Chris will be co-hosting our second session. So before we had the interest group, we had a working group, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that before I hand to Hannah to talk about the interest group. So the working group, all RDA working groups run for around 18 months. And during that time, we were focused on the outputs, which were a National PID Strategies Guide and a checklist to facilitate uptake and alignment. So originally, we were tasked with coming up with a blueprint for, I guess, setting out, establishing and running a national PID strategy. And what we found in the course of our working group is that there is no blueprint because most of these national PID strategies are still in progress. No one's really completely finished this yet. And it's a really growing and emerging area. So more and more PID strategies nationally are happening around the world. So we had an open call for case studies, and we collected 9 of those. So from Australia, Canada, Czech Republic, Finland, Germany, Korea, New Zealand, the Netherlands, and the United Kingdom. We did have other presenters at our working group meetings, but those are the case studies that we received in written form to be able to contribute to the guide. So the guide basically compares the information in the case studies and looks at common elements and draws out a checklist that you can use if you're looking to either establish or enhance your national PID strategy. So here are the key messages from our outputs: that the national PID strategies are on the rise and there's no single approach to developing a national PID strategy, but some of the core components: you need to have a clear value proposition with some use cases to back that up. You need a group or organisation that's responsible for driving the strategy development. An open, inclusive, iterative process that involves all stakeholders is recommended, and an accompanying roadmap that outlines the practical steps for implementing that strategy. And that engagement between national PID strategies and the PID providers is important for success. So I'm very pleased that we have Helena from DataSite and Lombe from ORCID here today to talk about their strategies, particularly around the topic of the day around equity. So the outputs are available on Zenodo and through the Research Data Alliance website. You would have noticed that they're doing a website refresh and things are very hard, or have been quite hard to find there, and that will be fixed, but you can actually find the outputs on Zenodo, and you can use those outputs in the development of your national PID strategy. So we had some help from the RDA Tiger program. If you haven't heard about that, Tiger is there to help boost the outputs of the working groups produced through Research Data Alliance, and they helped us by producing a white paper, and they helped us by making our checklist more attractive. So here is a little glimpse of it. So here is the white paper on the right, which is basically a shortened version of our guide, and on the left, the checklist Pathways to National PID Strategies. It's just it's a nice way of interacting with the material that we developed. And you can, it's not that you have to check off all things from 1 to 10. You can just pick where you are in the process or pick the things that are useful to you. So here's an example. You know, have you done the value proposition? Have you analysed just, worked out who your stakeholders are? Have you asked for use cases? Things like that. So please, you're welcome to use those materials. We do have some adoption stories coming through. If anyone's read the US National PID strategy, you'll see that they do reference the use of our materials in the development of their strategy, which is really great to see. And we know just anecdotally that others are using the guide and the checklist that we've produced. So I'll now hand to Hannah to talk about the interest group and what we're doing in it.
Yeah, so after the working group was or transitioned to interest group, there was a couple of items that were identified as the goals of the new group, and yeah, you can see them on the following slides. As the interest group, we want to facilitate information exchange between groups or teams that are developing their national PID strategy or planning on developing their national PID strategy. We also want to facilitate this information exchange or engagement between teams working on national PID strategies with international PID providers, ORCID, DataCite, Crossref, et cetera, et cetera. We also want to kind of develop the value proposition for national PID strategies. That's something that's going to be crucial for instance, for ourselves in the Czech Republic. We want to build a national PID strategy. We believe we are in the right position to do so, but we are going to need a great, very clear value proposition to start engaging with stakeholders that we will need to work with. Sorry. And Natasha, if we can switch to the next slide. As Natasha mentioned, we already have a couple of use case studies for different national PID strategies. We do want to collect more. And we also want to work on maintaining, updating the guide and the checklist that was produced by the working group. Yeah, a bit of promotion. There is going to be a 3.5 hours block dedicated to pure the national PID strategies at the PID Fest, which is a international conference on persistent identifiers that will take place in Prague in June, between the 11th and 13th of June. The National Library of Technology is a proud co-organizer of PIDFest along with ARDC. And right now it is still possible to register, but the on-site capacity is unfortunately already filled up. So you can still register for online attendance. Yeah, which is yeah, still hopefully a good option. Yeah, and everything is available on the PIDFest website, www.pidfest.org.
Good, thank you. So I think it's still you, Hannah. Yes,
yeah, exactly. So now we are going to follow with updates from other working groups or interest groups that are in some way engaged with persistent identifiers. And I am going to hand over to Josh, who is a co-chair of the PID interest group. And he's going to give us an update on their activities and possibly also a little bit on the Irish, the Empowering an Irish National PID Strategy session.
Thanks, Hannah. Hi, everyone. I'm Josh Brown. I'm the co-founder and lead for research and strategy at More Brains Co-op. Background working in identifiers and national research infrastructures, working at JISC. As a funder, worked at ORCID for 5 years and Crossref. So Really, really good to be with everyone today. Just quickly, I'm also a co-chair of the PID interest group. Let me just put a quick drop this in the chat. But there are two sessions. There was one tomorrow at 10:30 UTC, and a repeat session on the May 23rd at 2 p.m. UTC. That's breakout 6 and breakout 17. It's a PID slam, so it's inspired by the idea of a poetry slam. We're looking for lively, interactive sessions and lots of audience participation. So we're doing it in a kind of lightning talk format. There'll be 5 to 10 minute sessions, and you're going to hear from a lot of speakers. We're trying to make it dense and interesting and engaging, and recognizing that for virtual sessions, sometimes kind of that information density is a bit better. So you will be talking about a lot of different aspects, but the theme this year is this kind of PID slam. It's updates from across the world of PIDs, and we're looking at kind of the current state of the PID landscape, looking at some infrastructure partnerships that are involving, which are actually changing the mechanisms by which PIDs are delivered and increasing the reach of persistent identifier systems. And we'll be thinking about some of these challenges around bringing the community together and working with identifiers at scale. And it's some of these questions echo the questions we're talking about here, like coordinating at the national level with international PID infrastructures and so on. And of course, there'll be another chance to hear from Tash on the National PID Strategies Interest Group, and an update from the Working in PIDs and Tools IG, because we're all trying to kind of come to each other's sessions and give updates on this and make sure that the conversations are carried across. So where we have this PID community coming together across RDA, we're all speaking to each other and sharing information and aware of what the other is doing, so we can actually kind of reinforce each other's work rather than duplicate it. So that's all I have to say on the PIDIG. I hope you'll join us tomorrow or next week on the 23rd to come and participate in one of those sessions. It would be great to hear from you. On behalf of my co-chairs, Jonathan Clark, Nabucco Mieri, and Adrian Burton, we would love it if you could come. I've also got a short presentation that kind of talks a bit about the background to a session that was planned for tomorrow, which was a birds of a feather session for talking about the Irish National PID strategy. Unfortunately, that session, they've encountered some logistical challenges and they've had to postpone it to the next RDA plenary. But what I wanted to do is just give you a quick lightning run through some of the slides that we're going to talk about, the presentation for that, just so we can kind of bring it up to speed and show the connections there. So I hope you can see my slides. But where they are at the moment is they're developing the Irish National PID strategy to support the implementation of Ireland's National Action Plan for Open Research. They have just published a cost-benefit analysis of PID adoption in Ireland. It's being supported by myself and my colleagues at Morebrains. It's being overseen by the National Open Research Forum of Ireland and its specially assembled PID task force, and in consultation with the Irish research stakeholders. And the project will be reporting and delivering its roadmap in July 2024. Now, some of the key points that underpin the principles that underpin the development of this is it has to be inclusive. I think, the slides that talked about kind of some of the checklist points, it's about stakeholders, it's about consultation, it's about hearing people's voices, making sure that we're reflecting their concerns. So building that based on evidence and making it transparent and openly shared as much as possible. This is just a snapshot of the section from the National Action Plan for Open Research, which calls out the adoption of a range of persistent identifiers according to international best practices, such as ORCID, DOIs, RAIDs, and RAW identifiers, and to implement this roadmap. So we've been working hard on this so far. The report was published late last month, the cost-benefit analysis. We have found that the 5-year savings after investment in PID integrations and after investing in a central PID support service would be 4,000 days of staff time, which equates to nearly 1.8 million euros, which is a significant saving for the Irish research sector. A major component of this is kind of stakeholder consultations. We've just wrapped up one of our major ones. The next consultation will be about the actual roadmap content. So we have goals, interventions for each PID. We've developed that using a method called strategic SWOT analysis, and we'll be publishing our final report after we've had a round of community feedback on the first draft roadmap in July this year. So as I mentioned, it's being led by the National Open Research Forum. It's supported by stakeholders from the PID task force, and we have a lot of interaction with the Irish research community. We have webinars coming up and other things which I'll describe here. So we have we've done a lot of activity. We started with a survey to make sure we actually had evidence of community needs. We've got an ongoing process of community engagement as well as the evidence gathering for this. And from July, there will be a kind of post-project national PID group established to kind of oversee this, that will incorporate some members of the current task force, but change as we kind of bring in different stakeholder groups based on the findings of the roadmap. And as again, just want to say that one of the key foundations for this are inclusivity, evidence and transparency. And I think these line up very closely with the models put forward here in the National PID Interest Group. I think that's my last slide, so I will stop the screen share there. And again, sorry we weren't able to present that session to you in full tomorrow, but we're looking forward to the session in November. And if you're coming to the next plenary, please do join us there.
And we also do have a couple of slides from the Working with PIDs in Tools interest group. Unfortunately, none of the representatives could be here, but yeah, Natasha will give us the update instead of them.
Thank you. So just to run through a couple of slides, I only have a few. So the National PID Strategies Interest Group held a joint session with the Working with PIDs and Tools Interest Group at the last plenary. So just a bit about them. So obviously they're more in exploring the sort of practical implementation of PIDs in how can they be used better, in that sense of building tools that incorporate PIDs. How do institutions adopt and implement PIDs? But it also involves the PID providers. So that while our group has generally taken more of a kind of strategic overview focus, they're more focused on the implementation. So it's a complementary activity. So here are some of their past activities: incorporating IGSN, which in case you're not familiar, the International Geosample Generic, sorry, they changed from geo to generic, International Generic Sample Number IDs into research tools. So that's identifiers for physical samples collected during the course of research. Also the joined up use of PIDs in workflows, which involves multiple research tools. Some of the challenges in institutional implementation of PIDs, and working with us on how to coordinate some of those things, because obviously the success of national PID strategies also depends on the success of PID implementation by institutions and in workflows, and by maximizing research tools. So they have a couple of sessions at this plenary. It's on bridging platforms and practices, bringing more tools together using PIDs. So PIDinsts, I assume that they are talking there about the PIDs for instruments. RAID, the research activity identifier, they have a collaboration there with DataCite and the Colorado University of Boulder Open Science Project as well. So there are their sessions if you'd like to attend. So I think I will just leave it there. Hand back to you, Hannah.
Yeah, now with all the updates done, we are ready to go to the panel discussion. We have three wonderful speakers, one of them being Helena Kusain from DataCite Engagement Manager, and Director of Community Engagement at DataCite. We have Lombe Tembo, Engagement Dean and Grant Program Officer at ORCID, and we have Melroy Almeida, technical analyst for ORCID at Australian Access Federation. And with that, I am going to hand over to Helena, I believe.
Yeah, happy to start. Hi, everyone. Just to say that DataCite is on its annual team retreat this week. So I'm in Marrakesh, sitting somewhere in the hotel lobby, trying to get good internet. So if I disappear, that's the reason. It's a bit of a challenge. So having said that, maybe I should dive in while the Wi-Fi is working and start clearing my screen. There we go. Oh, no, didn't want to share. All right, can you see my screen okay? Okay, perfect. Well, thanks so much for the invitation to join this session today. Really happy to talk about the work that DataCite's been doing on global access, really with the goal to connect all research. I think probably many people that are part of this group will be familiar with DataCite, but we're a global community and we share a common interest, and that's to ensure that all research outputs and resources are openly available and connected. As a global community, it's always been very important to us that the whole world is part of that and that we're truly a global organization. But something that we realized is that we still have more members in, for example, Europe and North America than we do in regions such as Africa and Latin America. And that was something we were really looking to address because we wanted to ensure we had equitable access to our services. And so there was a fairly extensive community consultation process where we engaged with people from all different regions to ask them, what do you see as the challenges and the things that need to happen for different regions to be able to engage and access the services and connect their research. And so the three main themes that emerged from that were, in some cases, there's a lack of underlying infrastructure to be able to start registering persistent identifiers. There already needs to be a form of underlying infrastructure. For example, you need to have a repository to deposit your outputs before it makes sense to assign a persistent identifier and register metadata for those outputs. So that was one theme. Then in some cases, also limited awareness of the existence of PID infrastructure and or also the value of PID infrastructure. And then also financial barriers was something that came up. And then we were very lucky to receive funding at the start of 2023 from the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative to launch a global access program to really get started with some of these initiatives and do more on global engagement. And so during 2023, this has really been one of our big strategic initiatives that we really focused on. With these three pillars, community awareness, infrastructure, and a global access fund. And so some of the things we did as part of our community awareness activities, we launched an ambassadors program with ambassadors in different parts of the world, so we can hear from them what's happening in the region, but they can also talk to researchers and organizations in the region, often also in local languages, to help them get started. We are working on a consortium partnership program so that new consortia can be partnered with existing consortia and learn from them and share best practices, etc. And not everyone needs to reinvent the wheel when they start. And we've been doing a lot of webinars and regional events in different languages in different regions to really make sure that we are present in the different regions and we hear from the different regions what's happening there and what role we could play with that and how we can support some of their local activities. On the infrastructure side, we did a landscape analysis to understand what's already there and what's still needed. And we're collaborating with, I guess, what we call service providers, so some of the platforms that are used by organizations globally, so that existing infrastructure can be leveraged to start registering persistent identifiers. And the last thing we did was we set up a global access fund and we launched a call for proposals so that organizations could request funding to address certain challenges. So that was open towards the end of last year and we received 185 applications. So there was a lot of interest in the fund. So we're happy to see that. And those were then reviewed by a global excellence committee, external reviewers, the board, and we received applications for outreach activities, infrastructure development, and also larger demonstrator projects to show what changes can be made to open infrastructure in a country. This is maybe a little small, but just to give you an idea where the applications came from. More than 50% came from countries in Africa, and around 25% from Asia and the other applications from the Middle East and Latin America. We ended up awarding funding to, I think, 12 projects. The majority in the outreach category. So as you can see across regions, different countries, 2 in the infrastructure category, and then 3 demonstrator projects in 3 different regions. And so those are now all underway, and they're all doing really interesting things. I don't have time here to go into all the different projects. Yeah, several of the people involved have been presenting at DataCite meetings, open hours. We're doing some blog posts on the work that's happening in the project. So yeah, if this is of interest, feel free to reach out or keep an eye on our comms channels to see what's happening in these projects. We are planning another round this year, another call for proposals for the Global Access Fund. We also have a call for support open because we heard from many organizations, this is such a good idea. We really want to support all regions globally to be able to do this. So if you want to contribute financially to this, that is possible. You can follow the link that's on this slide or just reach out to us, and we could add your contribution to this year's Global Access Fund to ensure we can still fund many projects this year as well and continue this work. Yeah, with that, I want to say focus is really on working towards an equitable and inclusive research ecosystem. We believe that everyone that's part of the ecosystem benefits if we can make more research outputs available and connect those into the global ecosystem. So all countries benefit from more countries being able to participate in this. And so we're planning to continue to work with local partners and stakeholders and help streamline and connect the research lifecycle and work together towards creating a more equitable research ecosystem. So I'll stop there. I hope my internet's data switched on for all of this, and yeah, happy to answer questions. I will have to leave at the top of the hour to go to the team retreat. But yeah, before then, happy to be part of the discussion.
Perfect, Hannah. Thank you so much. Your internet connection was perfectly fine. And now I will hand over to Lombe.
Hello, everyone. Sorry about that. I'm just going to jump right into it. Are you able to see my screen? Perfect. Okay. So I'm going to talk a bit about the Global Participation Program and how it links into the conversation we've been having about equity. I'm from ORCID. My name is Lombe Tembo. I'm based in Zambia. And just like the introduction, I'm the Grant Program Officer and Engagement Lead. So I'll start with a very brief overview of ORCID because I realize that the audience today has quite a lot of knowledge on PIDs in general. So a few ORCID facts. We're an independent not-for-profit, open to participation by all. The registry was launched in 2012. We're also guided by our values and founding principles, and we're committed to making fair, open data available via both our public API and our annual public data file. We also ensure transparency by allowing any member to nominate a candidate for the board. In terms of what services we provide, we have the unique persistent identifier, which is free of charge to researchers. We also have the ORCID record, which is a digital CV, which is connected to the ORCID ID, and which can include different information like employment, education, and other data. And then the third service is the ORCID APIs, which is basically a set of application programming interfaces and different services that support and support of communities of practice. So researchers are at the center of everything that we do. And just like the diagram there, in a nutshell, researchers securely share their IDs with the systems that they interact with. And this provides them with the ID and provides additional information that interlinks with the other systems. And then these systems then share information about researcher activities, creating a chain of validated and trusted assertions about researcher activity. And so in a nutshell, the right person needs to get credit for the right research activities, and this is associated with the right institutions. All of this is also automated, which makes it absolutely great. So in terms of equity, we have been making great progress in terms of global adoption. And as you can tell from the map on the screen, it might be a little small for you, apologies for that. But we do have users in 249 countries. And we have member organizations in 58 countries. And from the map, you can see that the green part is the National Orchid Consortia. And as you can tell that there are many gray areas, so parts of Africa, many parts of Asia, still don't have member organizations or consortia. So we do have 27 national consortia, which are the green. And then we have one regional consortium, which is in Latin America and the Caribbean, excuse me. And then the blue is for ORCID members. And as you can see, that's it still only covers parts of the world map. And we have about 8.2 yearly active researchers and about 5,500 active integrated systems. And so far, we have 1,376 organizational members. So we have made progress, but there's still a lot to be done because of all these gray areas that are still left. And this is why we have the Global Participation Program, which was introduced to in response to the needs of the community in partnership with our generous partners. So what this looks like is taking a two-pronged approach to achieving equity and participation. And the first prong is the Membership Equity Program, and the second one is the Global Participation Fund, which I will talk about a bit more in detail. So the Membership Equity Program is a discounted membership fee structure for consortium members. So if a consortium would like to start, what we have is an 80% discount for low-income countries and a 50% discount for low or middle-income countries. And the definitions that we use here are as defined by the World Bank income classifications. And this is bound to change on an annual basis, but that is the classification that we use. And there's also a lower threshold of 3 members for the initial year as opposed to 5, which is the number that we have for a consortium to start. This part of it is fully funded by ORCID. While on the other hand, we have the Global Participation Fund. And this part of the Global Participation Program is made possible by the generosity of ORCID's founding lenders, while the admin costs are funded by ORCID. So under the Global Participation Fund, we have 2 specific grant programs. The first one being the community development and outreach grants. And these ones are meant to fund local partners who are trying to build ORCID communities of practice in the Global South. And then we also have technical integration grants, and these ones are meant to fund development of systems that are likely to drive participation in the Global South. And while we're on the topic of equity, we don't, the Global Participation Fund is open to pretty much any country. So the point is that where the grant is being implemented, where the activities are being implemented, that needs to be based in a place where the communities are benefiting from the grant. So it doesn't have to be that the people applying are based in a low income or lower middle income country. So the structure of the program supports a diversity of grantees to spread the risk and also to increase the chance of positive outcomes. We, since 2022, we've had, we've been having 2 grant cycles every year with about 5 grants being given out every cycle. And in terms of funding awards per grant, it's between $5,000 and $20,000 US. And there are other grantee benefits like dedicated ORCID staff contact, also invitations to participate in the ORCID grantee forum and community, also invitation to ORCID virtual and in-person events, as well as grantee community events and inclusion in our ongoing communications program. So the focus of and goals of the fund align with ORCID's strategic objectives to increase global participation. And this is, like I said earlier, linked to how we're trying to increase equity and participation. Organizations that are engaged in research and scholarship in low and lower middle income countries are our focus communities. And we're really focusing on the global south where ORCID participation to date has been low. And I think I spoke about the goals a bit, but what we're trying to do is to develop ORCID communities of practice in low and lower middle income countries, and also to build the understanding and the use of ORCID in local contexts. And lastly, we're trying to create and enhance technical integrations that are that can then support these burgeoning communities. So this is my last slide. We do have our next grant cycle, which is scheduled for October 2024. We recently had our cycle 4 awardees announced. So up to date, we have 16 grantees, and I will include a link to their profiles in case you would like to read a bit more about them. Thank you very much for your time, and I will be open to answering any questions that might come up.
Thank you very much, Lumbe. And now we are handing over to Mallory. Mallory, you are on mute, actually.
Oh, thank you for that, Hannah. Let me see if I can just work this. Can everyone see the screen? Good, thank you. All right. Hello, everyone. Salutations, because I'm not sure if it is morning, afternoon, or night, wherever you're located, but it's glad to see quite a lot of people. I know most of y'all. Some of y'all we've met for the first time. So for those of you who don't know me, my name's Mallory Almeida. I work at the Australian Access Federation, and one of the things I do at the AEF is look after the Australian ORCID Consortium, because we're also the consortium lead. Now, I'm going to talk a bit about equity challenges that I see for the national PID strategies. But before we get into it, just bear with me a moment. I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the country where I'm based. That's the Yagara and Turrbal people based in Brisbane. And I would like to pay my respects to the elders past, present, and extend that respect to all the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. So this is a national PID strategy session. So I'm assuming everybody knows what persistent identifiers are. But for those that don't, it is a long-lasting reference to a scholarly entity. What it does is you can look at provenance, it provides guarantees, it's machine readable, and there's a lot of metadata around it. But more towards equity challenges and inequity. So I'm not sure if you've seen this cartoon before, but equity challenges effectively points to presence of obstacles to fairness, whereas inequity indicates the actual unfairness or disparity itself. So what it means is that there are situations where it is already unfair and it is difficult for someone to get past that. Now, there are a few cost barriers involved with equity challenges and inequity in that with PID adoptions, PIDs cost to implement, right? You have to pay to mint a DOI. You have to get an ORCID membership to be able to integrate your systems with ORCID. After that, you have to actually either pay for the systems or there is technical development involved in connecting those systems to ORCID. So what do organizations that cannot afford to do it do? Now, there are programs we've just seen Elena talk about the GAP program by DataSite. Crossref has their GEM program, whereas ORCID also have a program that looks at equity for members. But it does go towards addressing some of these issues. However, for me, the question is what happens after the funds run out, because they are time limited. And since persistent identifiers isn't a static thing where you just implement it once and forget about it, you need to look at maintaining it and updating it, which all costs money. And for lower and middle income countries, continuing to implement PIDs or include PIDs as part of their strategy continuously means constant investment. And sometimes, depending on how the currency is fluctuating, it's quite difficult for them to determine future costs. So those are some of the things that also need to be taken into account when we're looking at national PID strategies, or at least PID implementation across the board. Then again, there is what I'd like to call as possibility of monopolization. So think of it this way, in that if we consider making PIDs as a global requirement for research, especially because PIDs are great, they interconnect with each other, they're able to refer to linkages. There's a lot of inherent trust based in those linkages because they're all coming from sources of truth. But what happens with low and middle income countries, or countries or places where there is already embedded inequity? What happens? I mean, you have places where countries or organizations struggle with lower visibility in terms of their research and also perceived credibility. And if they are then unable to participate with PIDs or participate in PIDs, in that minting DOIs or connecting ORCID IDs to different systems, then there is always going to be a difference in how that research is being viewed, because established ways of actually determine whether the research is good or not isn't that possible. So, and if they're made a global requirement, then those that cannot implement PIDs or participate are at a significant disadvantage. So requirements to assign PIDs in order to consider to be legitimate sort of research will only exacerbate this situation. And then finally, there is always a misalignment of funding and policy, in that they don't always go hand in hand. You might have funding which says, look, PIDs are mandatory and organizations should actively use it. But then you have smaller organizations that might not necessarily afford the cost of implementing persistent identifiers. They might not necessarily be able to integrate ORCID into their systems. They might not necessarily be able to mint DOIs or use DOIs to do those reporting. So there needs to be thought devoted to seeing how we can help those organizations, because if the larger organizations can do it, they tend to move ahead, whereas again, the challenges for equity for smaller organizations continue to be there. And those are some of my points that I had with regards to equity challenges with regards to national PID strategies. And I'm happy to take any questions on them.
Mallory, thank you very much. And we still have a little bit of time, for a very short amount of time for discussion. But
I think we have 40 minutes actually, Hannah. It's an hour and a half
Yes,
session.
sorry. No. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, sorry. Okay, so we have plenty of time. That's good news. I am not seeing any questions in the collaborative notes. Yeah.
Okay, so I think we just open it up to anything that anyone wants to raise. Any thoughts on what you've heard today from the fantastic programs at DataCite and ORCID, and Melroy sharing some pretty profound thoughts there on how to be more equitable in access to PIDs? It's a very quiet group. Wow.
I'm sorry about that. I think it was a little bit too heavy, so everybody's taking time to digest that now.
Must be that. Well, Helena, I did have a look at some of the programs, some of the projects under your programs, but did you, I mean, from what I could see, a lot of it was just awareness raising about PIDs with the right audiences in those countries. Would you like to talk a little bit more? Maybe some of them are quite a lot more than that, but could you give us a flavor of some of the projects?
Yeah, no, of course, happy to. Yeah, I think in the outreach category, those are slightly smaller projects. So those are often more focused on having conversations in a country and just increasing awareness of possibilities and organizing workshops, etc., which I think is very valuable because one of the barriers we identified is just that sometimes the awareness isn't there. So if we can bring more information, I think that's a good starting point. I think especially the demonstrators are much bigger projects. For the project in Nigeria, for example, they're looking at doing a large project with museums to get IGSNs registered for the artifact in museums in Nigeria, which I think will be a really great example also for how IGSNs can be used in different ways and different domains. So I think that's an exciting one. And the demonstrator project in Brazil, for example, they're very much focused on climate-related challenges. So I think also a very relevant topic that they're working on and showing how persistent identifiers can play a role in it. So I think, yeah, we're definitely also looking at sort of more societal impact and not just having a conversation about persistent identifiers, but very much also the role persistent identifiers can play when it comes to some societal challenges at the moment. So yeah, I also really hope that at the end of the project, so they're all running for 1 year, that we can have some nice examples of what it means to use persistent identifiers and what you can achieve both within a research context, but also in a societal context by doing that and making everything available, all research outputs available in that way.
Oh, that's great. And I can imagine that the IGSN project encompasses quite a lot more than just the identifiers component. I mean, we have Leslie on the call, who's the queen of physical sample identifiers here, but you know, whenever those are discussed, it's also just about the better management of samples all overall and how they are made discoverable and linked in the literature and all those kind of things. So I assume they all come up as part of the project because it's about the discovery of the resources that the PIDs are describing. So
yeah, and if I could add another important thing, Natasha, also I'm really interested in, Elena, that you're doing something in Africa. Another thing, a couple of us, this will be in the care for physical samples session. God, I think it's tomorrow. But we're also now trying to get those like care principles, local context, local notices onto the actual samples themselves so that downstream data generated from them, particularly where they've come from global south, and then they get commercialized in the global north. We've got that credit, etc. But that has to be implemented, like as the sample's collected, not really, as the sample and the project's finished and the sample goes into the museum.
Mm. So Chris Brown, one of our co-chairs, has asked the question of what can the Research Data Alliance, and in particular this group, to fix some of the equity challenges or help and support existing activities that are trying to remove barriers to adoption and integration. So do you have any thoughts on that, Lombe, Helena, or Melroyd? Any thoughts on how we might?
Yes,
Yep.
I do have some thoughts. One of the things I think we need to look at is, or every country needs to be looked at differently. And yes, initial funds need to be provided, but we also need to look at what policy changes are required, who the main players are. We also need to get government, get industry, get the organizations within those countries to take part in it and see what can be done to be able to get them to participate in it. Yes, cost could be a barrier, but that could be addressed. What needs to also be looked at is how to make them sustainable. And what can we do in terms of getting them to that point of sustainability where for them then it is much easier to participate in such things and overcome that embedded inequity, so as to speak.
Leslie?
I think there's actually something more fundamental to get the equity if you want to get into the global south. It's actually trying to find out who you connect with.
Mm.
And I'm just saying this, I mean, this is geochemistry, and geochemistry does identifiers on data and on samples. And we've just done a review of global geochemistry databases, and we were appalled that we couldn't find any online ones that were from the majority of the global south, meaning Africa, so subcontinent of Asia and South America. And we feel they're out there, but we just don't know who to connect. And about the only group I know that's got reasonably good roots into the global south is the work that CODATA's doing, and they've got their connections through the International Science Council. But it really is, I don't know whether RDA can help build a registry of, who are the best people to connect. So like I saw you've got someone from the African PID group. Well, I mean, that's a good group to know and be able to connect with. And then also, assuming that they want to connect with us. And the other important thing is that we want to make sure that if we go into the global south, because I've done a bit of work with them, is that we're going in to help them get their infrastructures set up. We're not there to, like helicopter science, go in, take their data and bring it back to the global north and then create databases and registries there. We want to make sure we do it in there with them and get them going.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Leslie. And when we published our working group outputs from the National PID Strategies Working Group, the guide and case studies, and it's floated for public comment by the RDA, one of the comments that came back was, why did you pick those 9 case studies? There's a lot missing there in terms of Global South participation. But our response to that was, of course, that we had an open call for case study submissions, and we can't make people submit them. And it may just reflect that those countries aren't yet advanced enough to submit a case study, or it could be that they're just not participating in the RDA or in our part of the RDA. So I think that's one of the reasons why we picked this topic, is we really wanted to open it up for discussion and try and get some involvement there. And I think we have a very good selection of speakers today, and also in that second session where we have, you know, Chile, India, Africa, you know, Brazil represented. So I think we'll start to expand there just through talking about this topic. The other thing I'd like to point out is that, you know, addressing the challenges with our colleagues in Global South is one aspect of equity, but equity challenges also happen, of course, just in you know, the global north, is that a term? The global north? I don't know. But yeah, I mean, for example, this topic came up as well because one of our co-chairs, John Aspler, while he's in Canada, you know, language is a challenge that is an equity challenge in Canada in terms of giving people access to PID infrastructure and being able to describe their research outputs. And another challenge in Canada in relation to PIDs is also a challenge in Australia and a lot of other countries, and that's around Indigenous knowledge and the representation of Indigenous data and Indigenous research. So the challenges aren't just to any one country, but to actually all of us in different ways. And it's really about how to best facilitate a conversation in which we can, you know, learn from the people who have begun to address these. So well done, ORCID and DataCite, setting really fantastic examples there of, no, we're going to try and make this happen, and putting in place some really concrete programs to be able to do that. And I think that's fantastic. And it's then what can we do then in our group to help that along as well. So any ideas that people have, please just add them into the document or bring them to the next session where we will have some of those other speakers as well. Hannah, do we have any questions in the document? Anything coming through?
Nope.
Well, if not, we might make it an earlier mark for people. I'll just have another, I'll leave it for a minute to just see, does anyone else want to raise anything in this session? Chris, you've come on camera.
Yeah, I'm on camera. I did have another question, but Helena's left now, so it's she won't be able to answer it. But I mean, ORCID and DataCite, you know, and I think Crossref, they have these programs and funds. I just wondered if there was any coordinated activity across organisations to sort of join up some of this work rather than relying on organisations doing it separately. I mean, they're great activities. I just wonder if there's a coordinated approach anyway. Sorry, Lambert, you're the only person to answer that one.
Sure. Yeah, so what we do, excuse me, I'll speak for ORCID, but what we do is apart of the organizations doing their separate activities, we do make sure that they whatever activities they have that can connect, we do facilitate for that to happen. And we've had several activities where grantees then sort of coordinate their own activities on their own, with ORCID just basically facilitating, but they're the ones who do all the coordination, and they have all these outreach events. And yeah, so basically we do facilitate, but they do then connect on their own as well. So yeah, I hope that answers the question.
Thanks.
Also, Natasha, real quick, I also just wanted to add on to something that Leslie said earlier about collaborations and how someone mentioned something about how we can't really force people to apply. So even though we know the people that would benefit from a specific program, we can't force them to apply. But what we have been doing to sort of go around that is that we look at it from the other way, from the other side of things. So for instance, we know that DSpace is widely used in the Global South. And so we do reach out to the organizations that can improve the sort of the technical infrastructure there, and then they can then apply for the technical integration grants. So we don't just wait for organizations to apply, but sometimes we do reach out and sort of to apply. And that we did have one of our first grantees was the Technical University of Hamburg, and they improved the ORCID login for DSpace quiz. And there's more information in the links that I provided, but that's just one idea to sort of go around that.
That's fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. So we have Martin from Crossref.
Yeah, I just thought I could provide some input response to the question from the Crossref point of view. I think it's really fascinating to hear the different organisations talking about the challenges, and I think we talk very regularly with DataCite and with ORCID. I think the challenges that we have are slightly different, and so the approaches that we have are slightly different. So while there is some scope for kind of working together, I think a joint program doesn't quite make sense at the moment. I mean, for example, we already have a large number of members in the global south, in Africa, for example. What we don't have in Africa is sponsoring organizations which are able to facilitate local support and things like that. So we have a slightly different challenge in that respect, for example, but we certainly are taking similar approaches. I wasn't aware of the ORCID Ambassador program, for example, and that's something that we've done, and it's not my area specifically, but I'm sure there's been conversations about how that's worked, and it's been really effective for us and useful for getting to know some of the challenges for members in the global south, and also connecting better with the communities there.
Fantastic. Yeah, thanks, Martin. That's really good to hear. It's good to have Crossref here as well, and talking about some of these issues. So thank you for that. There's a comment here. This is just a comment on data DOI without Dr. Helena. This may not be of the session's major topics, but as for building a global PID infrastructure, especially for data DOI, part of the DOI registration agency group is doing their own data DOI minting. I'm concerned about nationally or regionally siloed data DOI registrations. Then, although inter-RA harvest and interdiscoverable network of such regional data DOIs could not be on your immediate action plan, but I hope this idea would be placed somewhere in your mind when you see the better network of research data in the future. Thanks. Great. Thank you for that comment. Does anyone have any thoughts on that? So DataCite has a Asia Pacific community engagement steering group that I'm part of, and that is a good avenue for sharing some of the challenges between that the different DOI agencies are facing, and trying to coordinate better between registration agencies that are part of the Asia Pacific region, such as KISTI in Korea, and DataCite. So I think forums like that are needed to try and coordinate a bit better between the agencies. I think that's a good suggestion. Okay, any other questions, suggestions, comments? If not, then thank you very much for attending today. Hannah and I are very grateful that you were here and contributed your thoughts. And I think we might have a completely different crowd in the second session, because it probably makes it some ridiculous hour of the day or night for everybody here. So thanks very much, and enjoy the rest of the plenary. And feel free to join the group, reach out at any time. And thanks very much again to our speakers, to Melroy and Lombe and Helena, who's had to go back to the DataCite retreat. Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
I think I just press end meeting for all, Hannah.
Yeah.